Well, welcome to the 700 Club. An outrageous allegation from a BBC anchor has put a spotlight on media bias against Israel.
More than 50 Israelis have been killed or injured by terrorists from Jenin in the past year. Still, Israel's being blamed for the violence in the media. Chris Mitchell reports from Jerusalem.
During an interview with former Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett, a BBC anchor made the following statement.
Terrorists, but children. The Israeli forces are happy to kill children.
The anchor noted 4 of the 11 terrorists killed were under the age of 18. Bennett responded with this question.
You know, it's quite remarkable that you'd say that because they're killing us. Now, if there's a 17-year-old Palestinian that's shooting at your family, Anjana, what is he?
After the interview, the BBC apologized for the anchor's statement. While this was a legitimate subject to examine in the interview, we apologize that the language used in this line of questioning was not phrased well and was inappropriate.
I found their apology to be rather pathetic. That was just such a preposterous allegation, especially during an operation in which there were how many civilian deaths, Chris? 0.
Gil Huffman is executive director of Honest Reporting, a group that monitors the media's reporting on Israel. He says when the media gets it wrong about Israel, it can become a matter of life and death. He points to coverage during this year's Ramadan, when Muslim rioters barricaded themselves in the Al-Aqsa Mosque on the Temple Mount. When Israeli police went inside to stop the rioters from harming worshippers, the story got flipped upside down.
They took YouTube videos that made it look like it was the IDF attacking these rioters. And of course, the headlines around the world were Israeli police attack worshippers in mosque. And that was the exact opposite of the truth. But that false reporting was used as an excuse to fire rockets at Israelis from Syria, Lebanon, and Gaza.
Hoffman says another example is when CNN anchor Christiane Amanpour claimed Rabbi Leo D's wife and 2 daughters were killed in a shootout rather than murdered in a terror attack. Weeks later, Amanpour apologized. CBN News asked Rabbi D about her statement.
Tremendously upset, I and the kids, to be accused of a family being terrorists. Then we had 2 other interactions, as you say, with CNN, both of which made me feel like I was the terrorist and the terrorist somehow was the victim. And I think this is endemic in the CNN reporting, and so we are planning to take them to court, and the planning for that is currently underway.
Hoffman believes it's important to hold the media to account for bias against Israel, and he says that can save lives and help bring true peace to the region. Gordon?
Well, Chris, the IDF hasn't taken action on this scale in the West Bank for decades, so why was the raid necessary?
Well, yeah, that's right. It was 20 years ago, at least, that they went into Jenin. As we reported, more than 50 Israelis were killed or injured from terrorists operating out of Jenin. So the bulk of terrorist infrastructure in the West Bank, Judea and Samaria, was in Jenin. And the terror attacks are really, Gordon, just part of the picture. There's Molotov cocktails, pipe bombs, shootings, and they have been happening there on a daily basis. In May alone, there were about 200 of these kinds of different attacks. So that's what these people, 800,000 Jews in Judea and Samaria, face almost every day. And what's behind it many times is Iran. They fund these terrorists. They provide the financing for it. They smuggle weapons. They provide training. It's all part of Iran's strategy to weaken and eventually destroy the Jewish state, which is another reason why Israel felt like it needed to take a major action. And despite this, Gordon, many in the media, like the BBC has, they portray the situation completely different.
Well, I grew up perhaps in a kinder, gentler age, although I'm not sure the 1960s were all that kind or gentle. But at the same time, when reports came out of Israel of terrorist attacks, it was quite clear who was being the enemy, if you will, who was being the wrong, and who was the victim. And whether it was an airplane hijacking or the horror that happened at the Olympics, or all the various attacks that were occurring in Jerusalem, the West Bank, in all of that, it was clear who was the actor, who was the victim. So now the media is accusing the IDF of abuses. What do military experts say about their actions during a raid?
Well, last week we talked to the IDF former international spokesman. He just explained what the IDF was doing. But there's an independent expert that we know. We've interviewed him before. He's the former commander of British forces in Afghanistan. His name is Colonel Richard Hemp. And he said the fact that there were literally no civilian fatalities in those 2 days of urban fighting was remarkable achievement. He says it was probably unprecedented in modern warfare. He says the casualty ratio for these kind of fightings is almost like 3 to 5 civilians killed for each and every fighter. And while Western armies do their best to avoid civilian casualties, now this is what he said. He doubts that any other army in the world would be able to achieve what the IDF did in Jenin. And more remarkable because what the terrorists do in Jenin and any kind of fighting like this, they hide behind the civilian population, use them as human shields, and they do it deliberately. By killing civilians, they attract world condemnation to Israel. We've seen that happen in Gaza, seen that happen in the West Bank. But the IDF does what it can to avoid civilian casualties and take people out of harm's way.
Is this, I guess, a form of newspeak that the media thinks if they repeat this again and again and again, that somehow people will start to believe it?
Well, it could be. It seems to be the method of operation of outlets like the BBC, not entirely, but these are sort of the egregious examples where we're pointing out by this BBC report as well as the CNN report that we talked about. It just seems to continue. Now, when we talked to Gil Huffman, he said that this is unfortunately something that continues to go on. Why they feel Honest Reporting and other groups like maybe Camera, they feel like they need to monitor the media's bias toward Israel on a regular basis to really call them out when they get things wrong.
Well, let's turn to politics because it's not just media engaging in the newspeak. President Joe Biden just called Benjamin Netanyahu's government one of the most, quote, extreme, close quote, he's seen. What's the reaction in Israel to that statement?
Well, publicly it's kind of mild, but privately it's more furious. Danny Danon, he's the former Israeli ambassador to the UN. He tweeted that the U.S. needs to respect the policy of the state of Israel that's determined by the democratically elected people of Israel. Now, privately, we've been heard that the reaction by many members of the coalition was actually furious about the comments. But right now, Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu really doesn't want any breaches in the relationship with the U.S. That's why some of the public reaction has been kind of muted. They want the U.S. Involvement in any military action against Iran's nuclear facility. So I think you have to see all the reaction in that light. They want to make sure they keep Iran the priority here in Israel.
Well, I understand that, but is the current administration, is Joe Biden just repeating what Obama did? Obama actually funded opposition campaigns against Netanyahu when he was in office, something that absolutely astounded me, that our State Department, that our campaign experts would somehow get involved in order to change democracy in Israel. It made no sense to me. Is this just a repeat of that?
Well, many people say that Biden's administration in relation to Israel is like Obama 2.0. There has been a report recently in the Washington Examiner that the current U.S. ambassador to Israel, Tom Nides, approved nearly $1 million in funding some of these NGOs that are actually behind some of the protests right now against the current government. So it seems like the Biden administration really is doing what they can to really foment some of the opposition against the current coalition. At least that's what the Washington Examiner had reported. But many believe, because of a number of actions, that what they're seeing in the Biden administration, whether it's relation to the Palestinian Authority or other issues in Iran especially, is really the second administration of the Obama administration.
Well, Chris, thanks for the insight. Thanks for the reporting. And for you at home, we stand with Israel. That was a pledge my father made in the 1970s. we will stand with them, and we will bring you accurate reporting of what's happening. So what you're hearing in the media, that somehow Israel is the aggressor, is not the reality and has never been the history. The Palestinians for decades have refused every single opportunity to create their own state. Why? Because their ideology demands that Israel, the Jews, be driven into the sea. That's their goal. That's what they've been trying to do for over 70 years. Let us recognize that. And let's also recognize what our own State Department, what our current administration is trying to do. And if they're trying to interfere with elections in order to achieve some kind of foreign policy, it is frankly un-American to do that. We shouldn't be interfering with other countries' elections. Well, in other news, 5 months ago, a massive earthquake struck Turkey. More than 50,000 people died in the disaster, and more than 1 million were left without homes. Teams from Operation Blessing were among the first to respond with food and water. And today, our workers are still on the ground, helping survivors rebuild their lives. Lucille Toulousan has the story.
Aklem recalls feeling terrified as big rocks fell on their house during the powerful earthquake. She quickly grabbed her children and ran out of the house before it collapsed. But her mother-in-law was trapped inside and suffered a harsh blow to her head.
I was terrified to see my mother-in-law's face covered with blood. She was not responding and I thought we lost her. It was a scary day.
Layla needed 17 stitches on her head and spent 17 days in a coma. Aklem is thankful their family survived, but the hardship continued as they were forced to live with 30 other survivors in a greenhouse.
It is very hard. We lost everything and are starting from scratch.
Another survivor, Hakan, also lost everything, including his coffee shop.
It's been traumatic for me to see my friends' lives destroyed and so many lives were lost. There's so much sadness here, but I don't want to leave the city. I want to see the city rebuilt, but I don't have much hope.
Hope is what Operation Blessing brings to earthquake survivors during this time of rebuilding in Turkey. OB is providing micro-enterprise grants to help people like Hakan overcome their losses and begin taking care of themselves.
There is water and food as a need for the people, but what they really need right now is to generate some sort of income, to bring them some dignity.
Operation Blessing built a coffee shop for Hakan. It may not be as big as what he had, but it came complete with appliances and supplies that got him back in business.
It really touched me that someone from another part of the world who doesn't even know me comes all the way here to help.
Operation Blessing also installed water filter systems in 10 cities to help supply clean water during the hot summer. Ministry teams also continue to provide food and tents for survivors. Aklem is overwhelmed with the private space they now have, complete with a cabinet, dining table, a carpet, and a bed. She said Operation Blessing has made their life more comfortable and they no longer have to sleep on the floor. Lucille Toulousan, CBN News.
Those tears, that joy, it goes to you if you're a member of the 700 Club. You're part of that relief effort. We want to help people around the world. When disasters strike, we want to strike back with love and compassion. If you want to be a part of it, all you have to do is call us, 1-800-700-7000. We have a designated fund for disaster relief. It's called the Operation Blessing Disaster Relief Fund. All you have to do is put disaster relief on the memo line of a check. You can mail it to us at CBN Center, Virginia Beach, Virginia, 23463, or you can just call us, 1-800-700-7000. Go to our internet, cbn.com, or text OBDR to 71777.